Now, Chris Christie is jumping into the presidential race that makes 14 GOP candidates is a big crowd, a big problem for the Republican Party. Then the fallout from the Supreme Court's historic ruling that legalizes same-sex marriage. We'll explain why Republicans might want to think twice before they fight this thing. Also, President Obama is on a roll after a big week last week. Can the big guy keep the momentum going? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Dominic Carter in for Richard French. And we start with Chris Christie. Tomorrow, the New Jersey governor is formally announcing that he's joining the presidential race. Today, he released his first campaign video. Here's a piece of it.
If you're going to run for president of the United States, and you're going to ask these people for their vote, that is the single most trusting thing they can do as a citizen, is to give you their support. So you better tell them exactly what you're thinking and exactly what you're feeling. And when you ask about my moral compass, that's it. That's it.
Christie will be the 14th GOP candidate, and more are coming. Let's get to our panel tonight to weigh in. Jeannie Zaino is a professor of political science at Iona College and professor of campaign management at NYU. Brad Gersman is a political consultant and founding partner of Gotham Government Relations, and radio talk show host Frank Morano. He's on 970 AM, The Answer. So nice to see everybody tonight. So much to get to. Donald Trump is out at NBC in terms of his pageants. We'll get to that in just 1 second. Professor, let's start with you and Chris Christie, the governor in New Jersey. Do you see a scenario, a possible scenario, where he could win the Republican nomination?
Never say never, but it is an awfully long shot for Chris Christie, rather. He is going to have a tough time out there. The latest polls are not good for him in his own state, let alone nationwide, where he is wildly unpopular. He's actually more unpopular than any other candidate besides the aforementioned Donald Trump. So it's going to be a long shot for him.
I'm not so sure. I think Christie has that special something in him that says never die, that this is a kind of guy that people could rally behind. When you start watching the Republican candidates start to drop like flies, as they did in the last cycle.
Is that going to happen this time?
Oh, no question about it. That a guy like Christie could be the last guy standing to pick it up and just run. Look, the Republican base wants to hear tough talk, they want to hear straight talk, and they want to hear internationally really, really tough criticism of those in the Middle East. He can do that.
I don't see any way that Christie can be the nominee. I think his best chance to be the nominee was 4 years ago, and he missed that opportunity. I do think come the fall, you're going to see a huge resurgence in Christie's polling and fundraising. The media loves this, to take a candidate down and then to build them back up. We saw this with Newt Gingrich in 2012. We saw it with McCain in 08. People were writing off McCain, and we saw it with John Kerry in 2004. And you saw Newt almost get the nomination. You saw McCain and Kerry get the nomination. So I think Christie is really hoping for here. Obviously, nobody says this, but I think he's really hoping to be Attorney General in a Jeb Bush White House. I mean, he owes his whole political career to the Bushes. Where would he be without George W. Bush? And that's what I think he's going to have a credible enough showing to try to hope for that cabinet
That is
position.
a possibility, but one interesting thing with Christie, as opposed to a lot of the other candidates, is he's very close to big money. When I say big money, the billionaires of New York and New Jersey, and especially, of course, of New York City, those are the individuals that if he starts polling well, those guys and gals will get right on board with Christie. So he's very close to the money. All he needs is the polling, and then that could start fueling a real race.
But let's look at even his best friend in New Jersey has said he's going for Jeb Bush, not Chris Christie.
For now,
but that's not a good sign for Chris Christie.
No.
And look at, what does he have to run on? You're talking about straight talk, and his slogan now is telling it like it is.
Please.
If you look at the polls, nobody believes he's telling it like it is about Bridgegate. Nobody believes that he's been honest or forthcoming about that. And what policies does he have to run on? The economy is in the toilet. You know, I agree with Frank. He may have missed his moment. You know, now they're going to show that picture of him hugging Barack Obama, and it's going to be all over for him in the Republican field as he goes out there to Iowa and in some of those Midwestern states.
Unfortunately for Christie, so much of his appeal, which catapulted him to the governorship in the first place, and the national polls even 4 years ago, is this straight talk attitude, this plain speaking attitude. But with Trump in the race, the Republicans already have a candidate that's much more brash and much more outspoken. So what is Christie going to say? Almost as outspoken things as Trump? Where does that fall into?
Right, I think, Frank, that is a great point, and that is something he's going to have to contend with. But on the other hand, I think there's something we have to all recognize, is that when everyone's up on that debate stage and Donald Trump is there, everyone's going to seem small. Everybody's going to seem small, except for Christie, because Christie's the only one I think who can match him in terms of just being, straight, blunt, hardcore, maybe a little outrageous. The rest of them, they're going to start doing political speak. They're going to seem like small minor leaguers next to Trump.
Well, Professor, let me put this question out to you, and then I want to switch gears and get to Donald Trump. Chris Christie, we all know he's not a top-tier candidate right now based on polling. What might he possibly do to turn that around?
I think what he would have to do is he'd really have to see some other of the quote-unquote establishment candidates start to fail and move his numbers up. And that might have to happen by saying something a bit outlandish to get him some traction nationwide. And so, how is he going to do that, though? This is a big problem for him. He can't go too far to the right. He's caught in the middle, and there's not really any good thing for him to do. And to your point about Donald Trump, I agree with you. Chris Christie will look like, almost a straight talker next to Donald Trump, but how can you run on that? He's a politician, so he's caught again in the middle between Donald Trump's, ability to just go all out with no filter, and then the rest of the candidates. What do you do with that?
But that may be the perfect combination, because Trump may push it.
Because if he attacks Trump, Trump's going to attack him back harder.
Right.
And he can't respond.
But there is that interest in Trump in going all the way out here on a limb, and then everybody else is going to be, politics as usual here and make sure that they dot their I's and cross their T's. And then there's Christie, who could shoot that gap. And something I would suggest for any one of the Republican candidates is if you want to win, you need to throw out that red meat about the Middle East, about what you do with ISIS, what you do with Iran. I think those are the areas that people want to hear.
He has no foreign policy experience whatsoever. He was a governor of New Jersey. He is the governor of New Jersey.
Didn't seem to hurt Senator Obama in 2008.
Well, it did actually hurt him. It hurt him a lot. That was one of the biggest marks against him. I agree with you, but how do you go out there as a foreign policy candidate with absolutely no experience?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of red meat, he's trying to make his red meat entitlement reform in taxes. He gave those 2 policy speeches on entitlement reform. He seems like he's trying to actually out-Walker in the Republican contest. But the sad thing is, and Jeannie's right, he has a very poor record. And if you look at where New Jersey is, unemployment's up, debt is up, bond rating is down. And unfortunately, it's looking like, we saw this with Obama, we saw it with John Edwards, we're seeing it now with Marco Rubio and Rand Paul. It's looking like you almost have to run for president with almost no record, because the more these people are in office, the more there is to criticize.
Well, we kind of saw that with Obama. Let's switch gears and talk about, I'll stay with you, Mr. Morano. Let's talk about Donald Trump. He delivered a capacity speech crowd in Chicago today, and he's lashing out at NBC tonight for jumping ship on Miss Universe and Miss USA. He's lashed out at NBC, calling the network weak and foolish. Are you surprised that they dumped him after his, let's just say, anti-Mexican comments?
I don't know if I'm surprised in this kind of ultra-political correct world in which we live in. I am surprised that a network which made tens of millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars with Donald Trump on The Apprentice and all these pageants had no problem dumping him, but they're holding on to this liar, Brian Williams, who has shown almost no remorse. I mean, how do they justify?
I thought you were going to say Al Sharpton.
No, well,
that's what I thought you were going to say.
It's a murderer's row of con artists and NBC. And yet, Donald Trump, that's where we draw the line?
Wow.
Oh, please. This is ridiculous.
Professor, and I'll give you the last word, Brad, on this one. Professor, how do you top that?
Well, I can't top that. That was good, Frank. But I have to say, you know what? I do agree. There is a double standard here. But look, at Brian Williams is a performer. That's what he is. And they should have treated him as such and kept him on. And Donald Trump's a performer. They knew exactly what he was when they made millions of $5 off of him, and now they're cutting him off. I agree with you.
I don't know what to say about it with Trump. I mean, I always imagine there's more to it than what we see on the face of it. That you know, they made a lot of money with Donald Trump. It would seem like it was a good relationship. He says something sideways, which I don't know why that should be confusing or surprising to anybody. And next thing you know, he's gone. I think you know, there could be this anti-Donald Trump in the media, obviously, that could just start, you know, running him out of town. But that could be a good thing for him politically.
On that note, Republicans won't give up, and they won't step up to support the Supreme Court's decision legalizing same-sex marriage. Why? That could backfire.